Mike, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I appreciate that. I'm Mike Tremont. I'm a long-term economist in the financial services industry, former Washington, D.C. federal government employee. I worked for the White House as an economist for a couple of years, and I've been involved in banking for decades. And at the moment, I'm working with the Libertarian Party and standing for the presidential nomination. But I'm really glad to be here to talk about crypto because I think this is a really interesting question that you all have posed. And as I see it, it's got two or three different parts. Number one, will there be a recession? Obviously, that is completely possible, but it's looking more and more like we might be able to dodge that. But we have had a couple of recessions. Ron was exactly right. We had a recession in 2022, quarters 1 and 2, and in 2020, quarters 1 and 2, of course, in a much more dramatic fashion. And whether you call a frog a toad or not, it's still a frog, right? It's still a recession, whether leading economists want to say so or not. And what happens in crypto markets when there is a recession is that the value of cryptocurrencies dip, even relative to other currencies, even relative to stock funds, for example. Today, Ethereum is trading at something like 40% of the equivalent dollar price in the S&P index, whereas it was at something like 125% a couple of years ago. Cryptocurrencies are very susceptible to what happens when there's a recession. And that's because I believe that these markets are very complicated. There are long-term players and there are short-term players. And, we need to sort of bear in mind that crypto is a long-term play. So you might have to wait out the effects of a recession.
That definitely is. I think the question is, what do we think they're going to do, right? I know for a long time now, people have been looking at sort of CBDCs that are coming out around the corner. And Mike, maybe you can put some thoughts on this as well when I finish up here. But what do we think these regulators want to do with crypto? I feel like it's a bit of a big mixed bag. I feel like on the one hand, they're scared of Bitcoin and the power of Bitcoin and people having their own sort of freedom of money. But at the same time, you do also get the mixed bag of people who lose a lot of money in crypto, trying to flee from sort of regular financial institutions, losing a load of money, and then immediately going back to the same regulators and complaining after they've ultimately gone into DeFi and lost their money, right? So you are right. I think the regulators do need to draw a line somewhere because there needs to be some degree of centralization with all things in some capacity. But where is that line drawn, and what are we going to sort of see moving forward? Mike, I know you've unmuted your mic. Would you like to go ahead?
Sure. I do think it's an interesting question, and I do agree that the regulators are chomping at the bit to get involved. However, while I think that they have a short-term negative impact, and very likely over the next year and two, I wouldn't over worry that. Crypto markets can move away from various jurisdictions. There will be negative sentiment generated by regulators, particularly in the United States, by the way. Next year and the year after are going to be tough ones for the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve here in Washington, talking in ways that make potential investors in crypto markets very, very nervous. In addition to the possibility of a recession, and I do believe that it's not just a recession that can keep cryptocurrency markets depressed relative to, for example, stock markets, but just the threat of a recession can keep crypto values down relative to stock market valuations. Having said all that, I continue to believe that cryptocurrencies and anything else running on their blockchains, right, are long-term plays. And that if you're in the market now, stay in the market. I truly believe that the greater risk to a crypto investor is missing the sudden upside on the other side of, say, a year from now, on the other side of figuring out where regulators are going to go, on the other side of worrying about a recession. There is going to be a run up in the valuation of cryptocurrencies eventually. I believe that we will have a run up in the next year or two in a very bold fashion. And then at some point, and I don't know when, but at some point we will reach critical mass in the development of the smart contract economy. And when that happens, you don't want to be off the train, right? You want to be on that train.
1,000%. Does anyone want to jump in on what Mike just said there?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I agree.
I didn't realize when I got into this how I got into this back in 2018. And back then, I think Jeff would be able to attest that back then the laws were all over the place, 10 times worse than now. It was very, very grey area crypto was. We just had
the word Bitcoin, crypto, and blockchain were all the same word as far as a regulator, an accountant, or a tax advisor were concerned.
Yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare, and I think it's gotten a bit better now. Obviously now, it's been in a bit better place, but obviously this is the UK perspective. I don't know much about the US side of things. Mike, would you be able to jump in here and just sort of clarify where the US stands on all this regarding money laundering, ideas of crypto, sort of the regulation? Well, obviously gone over the regulation aspects, but the tax sort of situation, I know it's a bit different in the US.
It is a bit different in the U.S. The OFAC officials, Treasury Department officials, are still in a wait-and-see mode. They realize that they need to promulgate new regs over the next year or two. They firmly believe that the greater regulation they can bring to this market, the better it will be for the market. That is a fairly standard outlook from the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve in all cases. So I think that we need to wait and see what they come up with. But I do anticipate it will be fairly aggressive because they view it as, for our own good, right? And for certain players, it will be. And for certain types of players, it'll cause them to move offshore.
First, we have Tommy Brown. I'll just approve you now, my friend.
My stance on this is kind of twofold. I've talked to Mike quite a bit about this at times. I think first off, we and I'm speaking from the U.S. standpoint, we as a republic here in the United States, we have to get a consensus built that this is the proper way forward. I'm all for cryptocurrency. I'm all for Bitcoin. Blockchain it holds a lot of promise in a lot of areas, but till we as a republic form a consensus that cryptocurrency is the way we want to go forward. I think we're kind of walking a slippery slope because a lot of people are scared of it. I've got people here in the state that I live in that are very concerned with the digital coins or currency that the banks are getting ready to more or less push on people. The other side of this that I'm concerned about from the crypto side is the cybersecurity of it. What can be done? Let's say that the governments decide to do digital currency, or they do decide to do cryptocurrency. There is no nation in the world, to my knowledge, that has a advanced cybersecurity policy that would defend against this. I mean, we can't even defend the currency we have now against cyber attacks. So, there's a lot to think about. I do believe we're on the right road, but, there's going to have to be a serious conversation held between the citizens of every nation in the world, the central banks, the FDIC, and to some points, even the credit unions. We're going to have a serious conversation of, the safety of this digital coin, because let's face it, guys, cybersecurity affects every avenue of our lives, and it will definitely affect it will definitely affect cryptocurrency now and definitely into the future.
That's an amazing point. That's a really good point to put up there, Tommy.
The problem that I foresee here is, if I've been following crypto and cyber. Well, I've been following cybersecurity since 2016. Right now, we have two of the greatest threats to our ways of life in ransomware and extortionware. We have got to figure out a way legitimately to the ransomware and the extortionware can literally wipe you out with very little or no trouble. It's definitely a slippery slope. And I'm going to end with I would like to hear Mike's thoughts, since he is seeking the Libertarian nomination for president. Mike, I'd like to hear your thoughts on how we move forward as a republic with a cybersecurity policy in relation to cryptocurrency, if that's the way the nation goes. And I'm going to end there.
Tommy, I appreciate you asking. I do think this is a tricky situation. I do believe that we're likely to see the market fragment over the next several years, according to various jurisdictions, and which jurisdictions emerge victorious is difficult to predict in advance. I think that there'll be some jurisdictions in which, for example, this case is pursued successfully, and that will, as the other speakers have said, give a great deal of comfort to certain types of institutions and certain types of investors. But I don't believe it is clear that that will suffice either for all types of institutions or for all types of security threats. I'm almost, nauseated thinking about losing $2 billion because you lost control of your laptop. That is something that can happen so easily. As Tommy and I have observed just recently, all kinds of institutions' servers are in trouble in Italy this week on a massive scale from ransomware. Extortionware in particular is on the march, is on the rise. And in the United States, I believe that we are exceedingly vulnerable to this type of attack. These are the kinds of things that present real threats to the development of any market, but could certainly hold back the development of the smart contract economy, which I believe is the key to these markets really taking off. So as I see it, certain jurisdictions will go one direction, certain will go in another, and we will have a competition among jurisdictions to see which one proves the most reasonable and the most valuable for various types of institutions.
Yeah, it's a very loaded question. I mean, if you asked me 4 years ago or so about Bitcoin and holding my own assets, I would have said, well, the onus of protection is on the user. I've got this. I'm taking responsibility for my own money. There's no bank involved. Therefore, the expectation of securing my assets and responsibility is mine. But that was a few years ago, and that was before DeFi even existed. And there's so many tokens now, and there's so many eyes on crypto, including, like you mentioned, the cyber attacks and the hacks and such. It is a bit much for a regular person now to be expected to understand what Bitcoin is, how to get Bitcoin, how to secure it, how to keep it away safely, how to bring it back if you want to spend it. So it's one of those weird sort of situations, isn't it, really? I mean, I think it's best to look after your own funds, but I can understand how, you moved $2 million worth of Bitcoin to your wallet because you need to make a big transaction and someone's got some ransomware on your computer and then it's gone. It's one of those things. It's very difficult to mitigate and really look into. Who knows where that's going to go, really.